everyone, let's wrap up August. August was a strange month for me. I really enjoyed the things I did in the moment I did them. And when we look at it from a positive side, I could say I was living in the moment. If I look at it from the negative side, I forgot everything I did as soon as I did it. So I really forgot a lot of the things that I read in August. So it makes it hard to talk about the books, but I still want to give it a go. And mostly because I really enjoyed the books, most of them, and I want to talk about them. Other things that happened on my channel, I uploaded one reading blog, a review, and a letter to August. Thank you all for watching, commenting, and participating in the conversation. Thank you all very much for sticking around and still watching the ramblings of someone who apparently doesn't remember anything. So let's get into the books in no particular order because I forgot the order I read them in. Let's start with the physical book that I also reviewed. I went on with my Discworld reread, and this is the 35th book in the Discworld and the 3rd in the Tiffany Aching series. It's not a good starter book, it's a very good book, but if you haven't read the first 2 books in the Tiffany Aching series, this might be confusing because it just continues the story. You don't have to have read any of the other 30-something Discworld novels to understand the story, but I would recommend reading the first 2 Tiffany Aching stories. Why? Because we continue Tiffany's story. She's 13 now, she's still learning the witching, she's currently living with Miss Treason, and they are watching the Morris dance in fall, because it's a dark Morris dance. Well, it doesn't actually exist, but it's sort of the winter dance, the dance that starts winter, and Tiffany feels like something is missing, so she joins the dance, which is not good because now the Wintersmith has taken a liking to her and she's turning into the summer lady, and things progress. I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed how we learned more in the background of how the witching works, how stories are important in humans' lives and how witches use stories, and also how important it is that the stories exist and the meaning for Tiffany to go into another story that wasn't her story and the responsibility that comes with that. I highly enjoyed it. I highly recommend, as usual, the Discworld novels, but the Tiffany Aching series is a fun way to get into the books. Okay, the next one I read was The Rain Heron, and I had this on my wish list so long that I forgot what it was about. I thought it was a murder mystery. It wasn't. The Red Heron is a really well-written book. I really enjoyed the writing, the descriptions, the character descriptions, and the way the story was told. You might think that sounds like something I didn't like, and that's that I'm not really sure what the book's about. The book is told in varying parts, and at the beginning, each part feels separate from the others, and it's not clear that they focus on the Rain Heron because the Rain Heron is not always mentioned. The first part is part 0, where we get a mythological legend or a story that is told about the Rain Heron. It's basically a story of a farmer who was very unlucky, then storms happened, and then the Rain Heron took residence in one of their trees, and all of a sudden they prospered. The legend tells that the farmer really was charitable and gracious and gave away part of their wealth. But some neighbor's son was really jealous about them being so lucky and set out to murder the Rain Heron, which, of course you can imagine, turned into doom and gloom, and the Rain Heron disappeared. The lucky farmer died of not being a lucky farmer anymore, but all their crops died. That's the legend. So from that we can get the idea that rain herons bring luck and prosperity. But then the story continues with other people, with other characters, and each part focuses on a story that is interesting and well told, but I didn't really see the connection. It takes a few parts till you get to see that the stories are connected and that everything is in the same country. The country is in a dark time where things are not going well, and there's, I think, a putsch, and the military has taken over, and a lot of people are forced into working in the military and are not happy about it. So it's scary times, and you can feel that all the time, but it's not really discussed as who's in power, what is happening, and things. And like I said, I enjoyed the beginning and the parts, but the more parts came and the more the story got connected, the less I enjoyed the story. And at the end, I'm not really sure what it wanted to tell us. So that's a little sad part, but I did enjoy the writing and I liked the idea of the Rain Heron. Never heard of that before. The next book was a surprise read, mostly because I forgot pre-ordering Navigational Entanglements. It's a space opera. It's a novella, but it's still space opera stylish, that you have a world in space where space travel between places is possible, but you need different navigators to navigate. I think it's called the hollows, the place between different space stations. And in the hollows, there are creatures that are dangerous and eating or destroying the ships and are, well, they're dangerous. So there are different space stations, and these stations are mostly controlled by navigator clans, and each clan has different skills and different mindsets and such. So the story begins with one of those dangerous creatures escaping the hollows and coming into the world where everybody else lives, and each of the clans is forced to send one of their navigators to catch them. The choice falls on younger navigators, not the most experienced ones, and as the story untangles, we learn more about why that is and what happens. That's spoilers, so I'm not going to tell you. But what the story really does well, I really enjoyed the characters, the description of the different clans and the different personalities and characteristics that are expected to have in each clan, and also how the characters that are chosen, or the people that are chosen, are not really the best of the best. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed how these characters that are set to find the dangerous creature start off not really liking each other, but turn into a found family. There are a lot of interpersonal things that are well described and happening, and I enjoyed it. Let's stay in science fiction. I listened to The Space Between Worlds. This is also something that sounds like space travel, but it's more a multiverse story. So we have Earth 1, and on Earth 1, someone discovered that there are many other Earths around that are parallel to Earth 1, and they share, I think it's a frequency. It's sort of like traveling between the worlds due to frequencies. And you need to be attuned to one. And they have discovered many, many other Earths, and they are numbered Earth 1, Earth 125, Earth 366 or something. And the smaller the number, the closer the connection to Earth 1, and the more similarities there are. And that is something that is important, because the Earth 1 set out to exploit somewhat the other Earths who don't know how to travel between all the worlds. So Earth 1 is the only one being able to go to other places, so they can observe the politics, the weather, whatever, and they can also exploit materials and, commodities. So bringing them back. Like I said before, the Earths are similar to each other. So in each Earth there is the high society, there's a city I forgot the name of, where all the rich people live. Then there is a middle place, I think it's called the rurals, where you're not particularly wealthy, but you're not the trash of the trash. And the trash of the trash lives in Ashtown, where it's really the poor people and crime and everything. So there's a clear class system in this world, and it's very hard to break through. There's a lot more detail about this when you listen to the book, but just to give you an idea, there's a class system and we have these three. We mainly follow one person who is able to travel between these Earths. Because to travel between the worlds, you have to not be alive on the other world. Like I said, they are very similar. The more similarities there are, the closer they are, but also the closer your personality and your life is to that of the other person in the other world. So the character we follow has a skill. Basically, she dies a lot. So she can travel to many, many worlds because she's dead in many other worlds. And that makes her an asset for the company she's working at. There are a lot more information and details about her, which are fun and interesting, but maybe considered spoilers, so we're not going into detail here. What I really liked about this book, even though it's the first in a duology, as far as I know, there's a second book out, it feels like a standalone. The story is closed. And I think that the second book deals with different characters, but is in the same world, which is interesting because I really liked the world. The world building was really well done. It was interesting with how the different worlds function and how they interacted or not interacted. All of that was very interesting. And what I also liked about listening to this book was that every time I thought something was going to happen or that the story would go in this direction, it didn't. And I liked that. It didn't make it very easily see through and foreseeable without giving you major disappointments. You know how you would sometimes want a story to go into a particular direction, and if it doesn't, it's very disappointing. But here it's more, it doesn't go in the direction you think, which would be the disappointing direction, but does something else. So it keeps you surprised and captivated. I really enjoyed that. If you haven't tried it out, just go for it. Another book I really enjoyed is Happy All the Time. I was looking for something that didn't sound like drama, that didn't sound like over-the-top emotional events and being manipulated by the author and the things and the events that are going on. And this is really the book. Happy All the Time is a modern classic. It was written in the 70s, and you can tell the writing is that kind of writing that you expect from books that were written between the 60s and the 80s. And I really enjoyed the writing very, very much. The story follows mainly two cousins and how they start their work life. It's not really focused on the work life, but it's part of the conversation and their lives, but also on their love life and the partners they end up with and how that goes. And I enjoyed that. Even though it sometimes felt like, oh my God, here's drama coming, it wasn't. Everything was presented in an interesting, calm way, in a neutral, not overly dramatic way, but informative. And I enjoyed that. The quirky part about the book, or rather the two cousins have a taste for completely different women, and that's part that they struggle with in their life, that they don't understand the women they fall in love with, and they know love them, but they're difficult. I really enjoyed the characterizations and the quirkiness and how things are dealt with. I highly recommend it as a very easy, calming read. I enjoyed the narration. The audiobook was well done. Then I listened to the sequel in the Investigations of Mossa and Platy, so the second book is finally out on audiobook. The Imposition of Unnecessary Obstacles deals with another case that Mossa and Platy are dealing with. I would not recommend starting with the second book because it's not really a sequel in a sequel sense that you have to follow the story, but you need to understand more world building, and some references to the first book are given. So in the first book, The Unknown Successors, I think, Mossa and Platy reconnect after university because Mossa is working for the police and Platy is a professor at a university where Mossa needs to go to do some research because someone disappeared. And that's how they got back together. In the second book, they have figured out their relationship and are still working together on a different case. This time people have disappeared. And we're talking about a world that's called Giant as the planet, and around that on stations people live nowadays. Basically humans destroyed Earth, so it's unlivable and we escaped, and Platy is one of the classics scholars who try to figure out how to repopulate and revive Earth. So that's her main job, but it's only part of the background. The main part of the story is the people have disappeared, and so that's going on. I really enjoyed this, mostly for the interaction between Mossa and Platy and their relationship and how they deal with the puzzles and problems that are going on. As for the mystery, I discovered that I'm not a mystery reader for trying to solve the puzzle myself. I'm more interested in watching the people, how they do it, than really being invested in taking clues and finding out the solution myself. But it's a cozy mystery for that. So nothing dramatic really happens. You're very cozy. It's well written. It's well narrated. I love the audiobooks, so just get onto that if you're interested at all. Before I talk about the audiobooks I didn't like, let's finish on Stardust Grail, the book I liked, but finished in September and actually just listened to the ending again because I wasn't sure I understood it, and I'm still not sure. So the Stardust Grail is basically set in a world where space travel is happening. It's in the future, and different planets are connected by these nodes, and you travel through these nodes. The universe is made up of different species, and different species introduce the node. And things happen in the past that are explained and are interesting and part of the world building, so we get all the information. But mostly what we're doing is following a young woman who used to be a thief and working with one of the alien races, the Frenro, to try and find the Stardust Grail, or the Stardust Machine, which is something they need to get children, procreate. And so, but they've been lost. So the thief and the friend row have spent years of their lives trying to find one. But finally the thief decided, no, I need to go back to university and start studying. So that's where she is when the note system starts to break down and something appears that might be a new clue to the Grail. So she goes back on the hunt and tries to find the Grail. It's a lot of the quest story and it's fun. The characters we meet, the world we're in, the interactions, I really enjoyed that. But then things happen and after that the book lost me. So everything was really well and made sense, but then something happened and all of a sudden it takes a turn, which I cannot tell you because it's a complete spoiler. And it does make sense with how it turns and where it goes then, but I don't know why it did that. So I'm a little confused if it's just setting up a sequel or if it's just I didn't want to give it a happy or unhappy ending, but an open ending, but it's not really an open ending. So I'm a little confused about the ending. If you have read or listened to the Stardust Grail, please let me know if you understood it and tell me what happened. Before we move on to a series I completed and read on ebook, let's talk about 2 audiobooks that were not so successful for me. One I don't even remember buying. Like I said, August was a weird month. I didn't have memory of a lot of things I did. And apparently at some point I acquired Peace is Every Step, which has been on my wish list, apparently. I have no recollection of this. This is a book, or rather a collection of essays or talks that this monk, the author, gave in the States, I think around the 60s and 70s. And it's very short, it's very easy. All of the ideas nowadays, if you have ever looked into mindfulness, meditation and all the things, don't sound new, which you cannot expect for a book that's like really 45, 50 years old. And I think that made it not really work for me. A lot of the ideas felt, in the way they were presented and talked about, outdated. A lot of other things were outdated in the way that they were talking about a political situation that was current back then, but could be transferred and put to nowadays political situations. So it's adaptable or transferable. There is a thing that you could do. But overall, I found myself listening and not really caring. And the same happened to the other book. Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It is something that I added to my wish list years ago when the author was on a book tour talking in podcasts and promoting the book. And I listened to a podcast and I enjoyed it and got curious, but I was always a little bit, maybe this is not for me. Maybe this is too woo-woo. And it did sound a little bit like not for me. And I should have listened to myself, but it was on sale and I thought I finally need to figure out what this is. And I was right, it's not for me. So this is a second edition of something that was published, I think 2012 first, where the author was really depressed and had a lot of setbacks. And one day he decided, I'm going to make a vow to love myself. So that's what the first book or the first edition is about, how he set this vow and how he saved his life by basically loving himself and giving himself some tasks how to do that. And this second edition came out in 2020, if I'm correct, and it adds more of what happened after he published this idea in this book, and also setbacks that he had. So I think the second edition is even more for me than the first one, but I still am not sure it's something that would work for me and that I need. Let's be real. And I think what is interesting is how he really discovered this telling himself that he loves himself is helping him. But as soon as things got good and well again, he coasted, like he called it. So he forgot to do his exercises and tell himself regularly, I love myself. And that is something that was rather annoying in the audiobook. The amount of times that you have to listen to him to tell himself, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. And it got on my nerves, honestly. I did think there were some interesting ideas of what he did, and I'm glad it worked for him. And it had me think more about how certain self-help books need to get into certain people's hands, but how do they? Because let's be real, who's going to pick up a book that says, love yourself like your life depends upon it? especially when you don't love yourself. Is that something you read in that point? I was wondering that. That is something I've been thinking about a lot lately and overall when reading or listening to self-help books, is the question whether the books reach the right people, because you need to be open for what they say or what they suggest to do. And even though you might need the help, you might not want to do that. So that's basically what this book did mostly for me, rather than work for me as something that I said, yes, this is something I need and that could work for me. So anyways, moving on to the last 3 books I read, which was a complete series, Guardian 1, 2, and 3. Guardian is something that has been recommended to me a lot on my Kindle, as I think more in the Danmai sense of the fantasy settings, and I was wary about that because not all of the writings and the stories work for me, and I'm not interested in all of them, but I was interested in some fluffy, fun, fast-paced fantasy with maybe a romance, maybe not. So I started sampling the book, and then immediately I thought the writing is a little bit clunky and not exactly what I like, but I was completely hooked by the story. So the story is set in China, and it's in nowadays China. We follow the Guardian, who's the head of a police department dealing with special investigation things, so ghosts and other netherworld creatures. And so that's something I'm interested in. And it's also based on a creation story that is part of, I think, Chinese culture. I'm not 100% sure if it's the creation story they have or if there are multiple creation stories, but it's more of the ideas of how the heavens and the earth were split apart, how humans were created, and things like that. And it is explained throughout the series, so you don't have to have any prior knowledge. There are a lot of footnotes explaining the details that when they refer a god or a artifact or something. So that was very nice. There are also reference books mentioned that the author used to build the world and the theories and mythology and legends on. So that was something I really liked. So the whole thing starts off with a murder, and the investigation team goes investigating at a university, and the Guardian meets a teacher and really falls for the teacher and is attracted to him and starts pursuing him. And it's fun to see that. It's fun to see how the murder mystery gets solved and things happen. But as it's a series of 3 books, it's just one of the mysteries that has to be solved. So I found the idea of the mysteries, there were arcs, and it was pretty clear pretty soon that the arcs were following different artifacts that are basically supporting a seal that is protecting the netherworld creatures from entering the mortal realm. And the seal is about to break. We learn that a little bit later on. So that's the whole overall story of the Guardian, how to fix the seal. And then there's a story between the Guardian and the teacher, and there are a lot of spoilers if I give you more information on that, so I cannot do that. But it is really interesting how it starts, how he pursues him, and how the teacher, you can tell he's interested, but he's trying to fend him off. But you also can tell that there's something off about the teacher, which is the spoiler part, which comes later. But overall, I enjoyed the series. I enjoyed the fantasy and I enjoyed the events. I also enjoyed the romance and everything that was going on. But the writing stayed a problem. It wasn't as plump throughout as in the beginning, and it could be something that is lost in translation, or that it's pretty similar to the tone of the narration in Chinese as well. I cannot say anything about that. But other narrative problems I noticed throughout the book is that we didn't really know what's going on. Sometimes it felt like the events that are happening and interesting are over there, but the spotlight was here. So we didn't really know what was happening. And in the 3rd book, we found ourselves getting a lot of info dumpy and explanations, so we know what happened. And there I really noticed what was off about the writing. So while it had me captivated and I really enjoyed the characters and really stumbled over a lot of things throughout the writing and throughout the story, but it was all in the way the stories were told, that I wanted more and to be more part of the story. And we didn't get that. So that is the downside of it. Other than that, it was a fun, fast-paced fantasy story. And that's it. Those were all the books I read in August. Like I said, I enjoyed my time with all of them, despite the ups and downs. Well, I may not have enjoyed the two I didn't like that much, but they were fly-through short books. So let me know in comments, how was your August? What did you read? Did you hear about any of the books I talked about? Have you read any of them? Are you interested in any of them? Let me know in comments, and thank you for watching.